Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story you probably think you know, but we're going to look at it from a completely different angle. I want you to try and forget everything you've heard about escaping Earth to go to heaven. Instead, we're going to unpack the Bible's grand story as this epic saga of God's plan to reclaim creation itself. So let's just kick things off with this, well, it's a bombshell of a quote, isn't it, from the scholar T Wright. He basically says that the popular idea of Christianity, that the whole point is for our souls to go upstairs to be with God, is a fundamental misreading of the entire biblical story, and that is the central myth we are here to challenge. And this slide right here perfectly illustrates that shift in perspective. On the left, you've got the common story, we escape a bad earth for a good heaven. But on the right, that's the story the Bible actually seems to be telling. God coming downstairs to rescue and renew his own creation. And in the end, making heaven and earth one. You see the difference? The story isn't about our departure, it's about his arrival. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to dissect that popular escape to heaven story. Then we'll journey into the ancient worldview of cosmic rebellion. From there, we'll see how God's Reclamation project got started, what victory on earth really means, and finally, we'll get to the breathtaking goal, a new heaven and a new earth. All right, let's start with the story we think we know. This whole idea of escaping the world, it often comes down to a simple misunderstanding of phrases like kingdom of heaven. We hear heaven, and we immediately think of a place, way up there, far away. But as T Wright explains, for a first-century Jew, heaven was often just a respectful way of saying God. So the kingdom of heaven isn't a destination we go to. It's God's kingdom, his direct rule and reign, breaking into our world right here, right now. Okay, so to really get the true story, we have to do something a little tricky. We have to try and step into the worldview of the people who wrote the Bible. And for them, history wasn't just a string of human events. Oh no, it was a cosmic conflict. The world wasn't just morally flawed. It was occupied territory, right in the middle of a spiritual war. And that brings us to this incredibly helpful little rule from biblical scholar Michael Heiser. Some of the things we're about to talk about, they might sound pretty strange to our modern ears, but you have to trust me, they are the structural beams of the whole biblical story. The weird parts, that's where the plot is hiding. So this is where the conflict gets way bigger than what we usually hear about. We all know about the human rebellion in the garden, right? But the ancient worldview saw two more critical rebellions. First, you have the rebellion of these divine beings, sometimes called the Watchers, in Genesis 6, who came down and corrupted humanity. And second, the rebellion at Babel. And this was so much more than building a tower. It led to a catastrophic cosmic event that really sets the stage for everything that follows. And here is the absolutely crucial consequence of all that. After Babel, some texts, like Deuteronomy 32, tell us that God essentially disinherited the nations. He handed them over to the authority of lesser divine beings. The problem was, these spiritual rulers became corrupt, hostile. This is the origin of what the Bible calls the principalities and powers. So the world wasn't just broken anymore. It was now enemy-occupied territory. So what does God do in response to this massive cosmic rebellion? Does he abandon creation? Not a chance. Instead, he launches this brilliant, long-term reclamation project. And the strategy? It was to start small. He would start with one man, one family, to eventually win back the entire world. This is exactly why the story of Abraham in Genesis 12 happens right after the story of Babel. The formation of Israel was God's beachhead. It was his chosen piece of territory, his portion, from which he would launch the campaign to take back all the other nations from their corrupt supernatural rulers. Israel became ground zero for this entire cosmic confrontation. And this brings us all the way back to Jesus. When he shows up and announces that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, he's declaring that God's reclamation project is now entering its final decisive phase. He's saying God is taking back the throne. He's invading enemy-occupied territory to establish his rule right here on earth, just as it is in heaven. This whole invasion hits its climax at the cross. But the cross is so much more than just a ticket to heaven or a fix for our personal sins. It was the D-Day of this cosmic war. It was the decisive victory in God's reclamation project. Just look at this comparison. On the left, yes, the cross absolutely solves the human sin problem from Genesis 3. But look at the right. It does so much more. It disarms those hostile spiritual rulers that came out of Genesis 11. It begins to reverse the deep cosmic corruption from Genesis 6. And ultimately, it reclaims all the nations for God. It's a complete, total victory. So what does that mean for us, for believers? Well, the church isn't supposed to be a waiting room for heaven. It's meant to be a small, working model of the new creation right here on earth. It's a new living temple where God actually dwells. It's a multi-ethnic family that reverses the very division of Babel. It's a community of citizens who have been transferred from the domain of darkness into God's reclaimed kingdom, and now we're tasked with showing the world what his rule looks like. So if we're supposed to be part of God's reclaimed territory, what does the opposition look like today? Well, the book of Revelation gives it a name: Babylon. Now, as the scholar K Beale explains, this isn't a literal city. It's a symbol. It's a symbol for any human system that's energized by those hostile spiritual powers, a system built on trusting its own power, its own security, its own wealth instead of God. You know, when the Bible says, "Come out of her, my people," it's not a command to physically pack up and leave the world. It's a call for a spiritual exodus. It means we're supposed to separate ourselves from the values of Babylon. It's intoxicating self-sufficiency, its love of careless luxury, and its whole system that, as one writer put it, makes sin seem normal and righteousness seem strange. And all of this brings us to the grand finale. The end of the biblical story is not our departure to some distant spiritual place. The entire narrative, from start to finish, has been building towards the exact opposite. God is coming home, for good. This is the climax. The final scene of the entire Bible isn't souls flying up to heaven. It's the new Jerusalem, the very dwelling place of God, descending to earth. The story ends where it began, in a renewed creation, a perfect fusion of heaven and earth where God lives with his people forever. This is the ultimate homecoming. And this is where that huge, cosmic story becomes intensely personal. And T Wright puts it just beautifully. Our salvation isn't just a fire escape from hell. God makes us right with him so that we can join him in his grand project of making the whole world right. We are saved for a purpose. So this is the big takeaway. If the whole point isn't to escape the world, but to be an agent of its renewal, what does that mean for how we live, how we work, how we create today? What part are we playing in God's great reclamation project? That's the question this grand cosmic story leaves every one of us with.